What's up guys, I got a brand new video for you today, and today we're looking at the Canon 85mm f1.4 LIS, and this thing's a beast. It's an f1.4 all the way up to f22, 14 elements in 10 groups. This lens has a 9-bladed aperture. Big feature on this lens is that it has image stabilization. It has a 77mm front filter diameter, has a close minimum focus distance of 2.8 feet. It weighs around 2.09 pounds. That's quite a bit lighter than the older f1.2. That lens comes in at around 2.26 pounds. It has weather sealing, so obviously the gasket on the back, and it's made out of plastic, but it feels like there's a lot of metal in here. So I have a feeling that there's some kind of metal frame in it and it's just coated in plastic, which is not a big deal. I think that it's pretty strong plastic. It's pretty similar to a lot of the other Canon lenses that are coming out. So talking about that, let's talk about the build quality. It's really well made. It's solid in the hands. You can kind of hear a little bit of a shaky sound in it when you move it around, and that's just because it has the elements inside of it that are floating on the image stabilization system. Once it's powered up, that shake goes away because everything kind of goes into its place when it's powered on. You know, it just feels really well made and worthy of the red ring. You might think, now that I've told you that this is plastic, that it's kind of a cheaper lens, but I actually would not say that. And also, the nice thing about it being plastic is that in the wintertime right now here in Canada and your hands are on this, you're not freezing like you would when you have a metal lens. Now, one thing that this lens does come with is a lens hood, and it's also plastic and just kind of has a ribbed plastic on the inside, but it does have the new locking mechanism. So there's a little lock switch on the side here that you can lock it down and it doesn't come off, and you push in on it and then you can twist it off. I have no real idea how well this hood works. It does seem kind of shallow for a hood that's designed for an 85mm lens, but I did shoot in the sun for one of the shoots and the test shots that I'm going to show you, but I never shot directly into the sun. The focus ring is rubber. It's super smooth. The focus mechanism in it is, you know, as good as it gets. And a nice thing that Canon did is they did not make this lens focus by wire like the older f1.2. This has direct connection to the focus mechanism, so you have direct contact, which is awesome for focusing in video. There's two switches on the side, the obvious autofocus and manual focus switch, as well as the stabilizer on and off switch. And the rear mount is metal with the rubber gasket, as you'd expect for an L lens. Anyway, I've only had this lens for about a month, and I got to do a bit of shooting with it in the studio. At the time I was using a Canon 6D, this guy right here, and I found that the autofocus was pretty good. I wouldn't say it's, you know, insanely fast on the 6D, but it was pretty accurate and definitely more reliable than the older Canon f1.2. I also never owned the Canon 1.2, but I have rented it in the past, and from what I can remember, it was pretty slow to autofocus. This definitely feels like a pretty big upgrade in the autofocus department. After that night when I was shooting with this lens and the 6D, I was like, well, I should probably get my hands on a 5D Mark IV, because to really see the true potential of the autofocus speed on this lens, you need a better camera. That's not saying the original 6D isn't that great of a camera. I just would say that the autofocus isn't nearly all that fast or accurate compared to something like the newer Canon 5D Mark IV. So I picked up this camera and I actually shot some social media stuff for a little bridal boutique, and it's awesome. This camera and this lens combined, it's super fast. The autofocus is quick. It's accurate. It might even be one of the fastest lenses I've ever used on the Canon system. So that kind of gave me a little bit better picture of what this lens is capable of, and now I think that I can give a better review since I used a better camera. Anyway, let's take a look at some of those images. So as I mentioned before, when it comes to autofocus, this lens is crazy fast, especially at f1.4, which is something that I wouldn't say about the older Canon f1.2. That lens kind of hunted, it was slow. If you're using it for portraits, it's fine, but the cool thing is, I would actually say you could use this for events and stuff. It's so snappy, locks on, it's quiet, it's fast, it's accurate, and I was not expecting that with this Canon system because I've been shooting with Fuji so much and the lenses and focusing on that camera are crazy fast. And I'm actually going to say that this is probably close to mirrorless fast, which is pretty crazy. Anyway, let's take a look at the focus speed and the sound of the focus motor. So using touch to focus point to point, I wanted to see how the focus breathing was with this lens, so pay attention to the edges. One of the biggest features on this lens is obviously the image stabilization. There aren't too many primes out there that Canon makes that has image stabilization, but with the stabilization on this, it lets you shoot down to like 1/120th, 1/130th of a second handheld, which is something I don't generally do because the subject around it might be moving. But the nice thing is you have that option on here. And the nicest thing about having image stabilization on this lens is for video. So when we're shooting handheld, it takes away a lot of those shakes and gives you a lot smoother of a look. And you know, at 80 millimeters, that's something that you would notice. Let's take a look at the image stabilization with the C200. This is with it on. This is with it turned off. With it turned on. All right, so now that I've talked about the features and shown you some image samples, I kind of want to show some things close up. I want to analyze some of these images and actually take a look at it in pixel peep and kind of get a better understanding of the sharpness, the bokeh, and chromatic aberrations and stuff like that. So let's jump into Lightroom and take a look at that. Okay, so taking a look at the sharpness test here, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I'm just going to go up to f6.3 because beyond that, it stays about the same. Obviously, diffraction sets in later on, but I'm only going to go up to f6.3. But first, we're going to start off at f1.4, and as you can tell, there's a ton of vignetting. And I'm actually surprised. I didn't see this much when I was taking my shots. Normally, I didn't really notice the vignetting, but on a flat wall like this, you can obviously see it. Clicking in here on the center, you can tell it's nice and sharp. Over to the edge, it's pretty sharp. And in the top corner, it's a little soft in the extreme corner, but not too bad out here. Again, there's tons of vignetting, but if we turn on the profile correction here, you can see that vignetting cleans up pretty good. At f2.8, you can see that the vignetting pretty much goes away. Dead center, nice and sharp. Corner, nice and sharp. Top corner, it's starting to get a little bit sharper, just the extreme edge here is a little soft. At f4, super sharp in the center, sharp in the corner, and starting to sharpen up nice in the extreme corner. Going to f6.3, nice and sharp in the center, nice and sharp at the edge, and really nice and sharp in the top corner here. So from here on out, it stays pretty much the same throughout the entire range, and then later on it starts to get a little bit of diffraction, but as you can tell, tons of vignetting at f1.4. If we compare this with f2.8, you can see that there's like almost 2 stops difference in the corners here, which is pretty insane, but the center is about the same in sharpness. Now if we go to the top corner, you can see that it's a little bit sharper, but it's about the same. It's mainly just the vignetting that's pretty heavy at f1.4. I thought it was noteworthy to take a look at the chromatic aberration because it's something that I haven't seen this strong on a lens in a long time. If we zoom in here at f1.4, you can see there's a lot of purple fringing and green fringing around the outside of the focus here. Stopping it down to f2, it starts to go away. At about 3.2, it's pretty much gone. It's pretty much under control. There's a little bit of purple, but most of that green is gone. And then at f5, it's basically gone. So going back to f1.4, looking at the purple fringing, if we go into develop here, we can pretty much remove it. If we go to manual, we can defringe the purple quite a bit. And then we can take the green back a bit as well. That's pretty extreme, but this is an extreme situation where I'm shooting a high contrast situation with backlight, but you can clean it up, I guess. It is just really strong. If we reset this here, you'll see it. In a real world backlit scenario at f1.4, I'll zoom in here and you can see there's a bit of purple fringing around here, but it's pretty easy to clean up if you just do defringe. And that cleans it up nice like that, and the shot's pretty good. So this test looking at bokeh isn't necessarily real world. You're not generally going to be shooting straight into Christmas lights, but I wanted to see what it looked like. Obviously in the center here we have perfect circles, but as we go to the outer edge, they start changing shape. They're not really football shaped, they're kind of odd shaped. They're almost a circle with like a bit of the edge cut off, but they look pretty smooth. As you can see, the rendering on the outside area here is nice and smooth. This is more what it would be like in the real world. You stop down to f1.8. Not much has really changed. f2.8, obviously you can see a big change. They start to become a little bit more circular, kind of with a rough edge. You can kind of see the aperture blades a little bit more. As we get to f4, pretty much an octagon at this point. Well, it's 9 blades, whatever that would be. But it does look pretty nice still, and everything looks more uniform and about the same shape. Now, depending on where the lights are at f1.8, I put some up higher this time, and you can see they start getting chopped off. which is kind of a weird characteristic of this lens. I've noticed it several times when I was shooting outdoors with lights. I generally would never shoot with this much light behind something, but if you are, this is the type of shape of bokeh you're gonna get. Okay, so as we saw on the computer, this lens does have sort of like a football, sort of oblong type bokeh around the outside edges. And that's when we're looking at straight on light bokeh balls. Obviously in the real world, when you're just shooting outside, it's still gonna look creamy and smooth behind. But when you're doing something like that, it's kind of like a synthetic benchmark for a lens, I guess you could say. You can obviously see the characteristics of the bokeh on this lens. And I also got this weird thing going on, which I don't know if it's this copy of this lens, but obviously having the top of the ball like being chopped off, kind of like flat. When you're shooting wide open, it kind of goes away when you stop it down to like f2, f2.8, but you obviously don't get as smooth and creamy of a look as you do when you're shooting at f1.4. And I find that kind of weird. I don't really know why the lens does that, especially being an L lens, which is like cream of the crop, best lenses that you can get for Canon. That's something that I never saw in the f1.2. And again, I don't know if that's my copy, but it's just something to keep in mind. And really that's the only bad thing I can say about this lens, because everything else about it's awesome. And I was not expecting that from this lens. Again, I don't know if it's my copy that's doing that. I guess I'll have to look around and see some other reviews if anyone else is noticing that. But this lens is super sharp in the center at f1.4, and that's all you could really ask for. The older Canon f1.2 was really soft in the middle. The edges aren't quite as sharp on this lens at f1.4. It obviously sharpens up when you get into f2, f2.8. This lens does struggle with chromatic aberration, which is kind of rough for a lens that's this new and for this price. Again, that cleans up at like f2, f2.8, and there's a lot less purple and green fringing. All right, so here are my final thoughts. On paper, this lens sounds awesome, and Canon got a lot right, but there's also a lot that they got wrong. The implementation of image stabilization in a prime like this is really nice. The body's a little bit lighter than the f1.2, and it was a good move to go back to the regular manual focus ring instead of having something like a focus by wire, because when you're shooting video and you want to do manual focus, it's way nicer to have this type of focus. The autofocus is super fast, super accurate, and very quiet. And like I said, it might even be one of the fastest focusing Canon lenses I've ever used. The image stabilization motor, as far as Canon's image stabilization motors go, is pretty quiet, but if you're doing video and you're using the onboard mic, you're gonna hear a bit of a hum / hiss type sound. With all that said, I feel like for a lens that's $1,600, well, it's like $2,100 here in Canada, which is pretty expensive. I feel like the chromatic aberrations could have been under control a little bit better. And that's kind of a letdown because obviously you can fix that in post, but it's a lot harder when you're shooting video with it wide open and you're seeing those chromatic aberrations. Besides those gripes, this lens is awesome to shoot with, and it's lighter and cheaper than the older Canon f1.2 Mark II. It's smaller and lighter than the Sigma 85mm. It has image stabilization. The autofocus is super fast and super accurate. Anyway, I just want to thank B&H for sending this to me to review. Eventually, I do want to buy this lens because I really like it, and it's going to be awesome for video, especially shooting with the Canon C200 and having image stabilization. Anyway, if you're thinking about buying this lens, put a link in the description where you can pick one up. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice, and I'll see you in the next one.